Hello, this is Arthur Malman. I'm your host for GGG Insights. And this summer, we're having a series of programs on the future of East Hampton, the problems, the challenges, the opportunities. And we're having a cross-section of the community, we hope, pretty diverse. We have some government people, we have engineers, we have builders, we have fishermen, we have clergy, we have a student or two. And I think you get the idea. We're trying to get a little bit beyond the normal discourse and understand what a whole range of people believe is in the future for East Hampton. And today we're very happy to have David Leese, who just became a member of the Town of East Hampton Council and is running again very quickly thereafter, and I guess run again. You run also again next year.
That's correct.
So you're running full. Happily, you're in good shape, so you can run all this time.
It's special.
But why don't you give us a little bit of your background,
Sure.
David?
Well, great, Arthur. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure.
Thank you to the GGG. My background, yes, I'm David Leese. I was appointed to the East Hampton Town Council by the Town Council in January of this year. Very fortunate to do so. I will be running in the general election. I have a primary first before that on September 13th this year. General elections in November. And then, yes, if I'm fortunate enough that the town votes for me, I will run again and again next year then too. That's what makes it special. It's the first time in 31 years that there was an appointment at the Town Council, and I feel very fortunate to be in the position I am in my hometown. I'm a lifelong resident of the town of East Hampton.
Oh, you were born here?
I was, yeah. I was a lifelong resident of the town of East Hampton. I was born in Southampton Hospital. My sister's 4 years older than me. I went through all the school systems here through East Hampton High School, and then I got my bachelor's at Penn State University in kinesiology.
What?
In kinesiology.
Okay.
Yeah, study of human movement.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and from there I grew up in multiple different houses. My dad built a lot of houses, and I would say primarily I grew up in the village of East Hampton on Newtown Lane and on Gould Street. I went off to university. I also worked in England for a while also, short period of time, and that's where I met my wife. We met in Brighton, England, and the name of my oldest daughter, Brighton. I have 4 daughters. My daughters are 11, 9, 6, and 18 months. Sorry, 17 months.
17 months, right.
Yeah, Brighton, Brindley, Bree, and Brooke. They're wonderful. They're in the Spring School District. My mother was a school teacher of the East Hampton School District for 29 years. She also spent a couple years in Southampton also prior to that. And my dad is an immigrant, and they came out here. He was a student. He worked in Wainscott here also, and I did a lot of bookkeeping and accountants, and then just really was successful.
Where'd your dad come from?
Indonesia.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
my dad immigrated from Indonesia.
Your
Right?
mother too, or just?
No, my mother's from Wisconsin.
Oh, that's sort of close to Indonesia.
Yeah, a little bit. He immigrated from Indonesia when Suharto took the regime over, and then he was the oldest son. He came over here to make a better life and also provide for the family still in Indonesia. And he's done that for almost 50 years now,
well,
more than that.
You have a pretty good background then for this whole series.
Yeah.
And now, unlike sometimes perhaps in a political debate, there's no minute and a half for a short answer. What do you think some of the opportunities, some of the problems that we should be thinking about 5, 10, 20 years out in East Hampton?
Well, great. So when I had the opportunity, I was presented that I would be looked at to become appointed to the town board, town council. I was on the zoning board already for 5 years. So I saw a lot of the issues, and I was able to forecast what some of the planning and zoning issues were going to be. When I initially came on, it was right after Hurricane Sandy. So Hurricane Sandy provided a lot of coastal resiliency issues that we had to deal with. Also, we were the town and the world, and the nation was just getting out of a little bit of a financial recession. So there are a lot of individuals that was just starting to buy these non-conforming pieces of property out here, either being commercial or residential. My last couple of years dealt with a lot of issues with building inspector determinations, appeals, and then also pre-existing non-conforming conditions on properties that we had to rectify or make a decision on as far as granting type of variance. So I had a very good feeling that with those 5 years, knowing that the Hamlet studies were upcoming, and the Hamlet studies, which were first told that we had to start them in 2005, that I wanted to be part of this. I wanted to be part of this, just not as a participant, going to the charrettes, which I did. We own a piece of commercial property, forthcoming, my family does in Amagansett. Not just going to the charrettes, not participating in the, just at town board meetings on one side, but I wanted to be on the dais. I wanted to take my zoning information, knowledge that I learned. I've been right in the middle of the planning phases of the town for the last 5 years that I thought I would be great to make a good decision based on CARP and coastal resiliency, and then the Hamlet studies.
Wait, CARP?
CARP. CARP is a coastal assessment resiliency plan.
Oh, okay. Really basically tied into coastal resiliency.
Exactly right, because us being a coastal town with 71 miles of shoreline out here, we actually have to prepare our future planning through for the Hamlet studies and further based on
Rising sea?
Yes, you got it. Rising sea level, these storms. We all know these storms are intensifying right now. And if one hits us here, what's going to happen to our communication systems, our shorelines, our houses, our infrastructure, our business centers, our fishing ports? We have to be very careful about that. So the Hamlet study is looking at that, and this is what I think I can really help with, make the decision with how are we going to approach the recommendations of the community, of Dotson and Flinker, to incorporate into our zoning codes right now.
What do you think is the biggest thing that's missing out here? I know at one point I was on under Supervisor Wilkinson and Teresa Quigley. There was a new business committee, how to attract business here.
Yeah.
And I was really astounded at all of the roadblocks for somebody to open a business and succeed out here. Because you mentioned the word non-conforming uses. And so much of our land here is zoned residential, and then you have a seafood shop or something, and it can't really expand, it can't even modernize, and because if it did too much, it would have to go through all kinds of shenanigans to be able to come up to 21st century, 22nd century now, I guess.
Well, exactly right, or just come up to modern day zoning codes, what's allowable. And then we'll go one more past that now, even go to county codes as far as health department's septic and flow rate and groundwater protection also then too. As far as business right now, we've become a very service-oriented industry out here then too. A lot of businesses out here for that. There's not much manufacturing out here anymore. I think one of the things we have to look at right now is how our town is being, the inhabitants of our town, how long are they living here? Yes, we have a wonderful fabric of our community, but it's being chipped away at slowly every year, because I just don't believe that there's enough job growth out here to provide the type of living standards that we need as far as financial, job employment, that people can afford to live out here anymore. $100,000 job out here doesn't really go that far anymore.
Doesn't go that far.
$100,000 job in the rest of the country, you'll be living on an easy street in some which ways, okay? I might be exaggerating there. So I think we need to track jobs out here or businesses out here, and they might be tech-oriented businesses that can come out here, go into either office complexes, office spaces. We might have to change the code or the zoning to allow for that a little bit more, as far as potentially allowing the use of basements. This is my own opinion on there, but keep the character of the communities on the outside of the building.
Yeah, one of my daughters works for PayPal, for example, high-tech company, and what always astounded me is how far-flung their employees are and how much they work off premises. And once you work off premises, whether you're down the street or 120 miles out in Montauk, it makes no difference. And yet, what's critical is telecommunications infrastructure, which we're lacking.
Correct.
How do we solve? We've been talking about this problem for at least, that I know of, 20 years.
I think we have to put the pressure on the utilities to help out on that. Do we ask Verizon to start bringing their Fios out here? Why is Fios stopped before it gets to our borders? Do we have to stop?
Fios is stopped because it's expensive. And if you run a Fios fiber optic line and then you use it 2 months a year and it sits dark the rest of the time, there isn't a great incentive. I mean, I personally think the town should supplement, if necessary, the telecommunications companies by building in the fiber optic lines along the town roads.
I think we have to try to figure out about broadband and trying to increase our bandwidth right now, however that takes. Maybe if I brought files, I mistakenly say that, but if the town has to do it, I'd be looking at all ways to try to increase that, because technology jobs, they're good, high-paying jobs. As you said, individuals can do it in their home if they needed to, which is allowable under the code. You can have a home office on there. And what it is you can actually start working with your businesses or companies in New York or potentially Chicago, other locations, and you're not changing the way our historical colonial town looks. What you're just doing is you're adding in an economics driver that we are lacking right now because of the infrastructure there too.
No, the infrastructure is terrible. And, we're also now obviously talking about deep water and electric lines and stuff. And as you know, there are some folks on the Energy Sustainability Committee who are also talking about local grids and changing the way we acquire electricity. And they're talking about, for example, burying lines.
Well, we've heard that before. We've heard you say East Hampton years ago about burying the lines.
Obviously resiliency in storms.
Correct.
But once you make the little trench, you can drop a fiber optic line in, you can drop a local grid line, you can drop a lot of things in that little trench. The little trench is what takes the time and money. So
it sounds like proper planning to me.
Well, that's part of the problem. I think maybe there's not enough. And again, you've sat right in the middle of this. Is there really enough coordination? I mean, there's a funny thing. If you live in Manhattan and you live on any street, at least once a week, somebody else is opening the street to do something because they don't do it all at once. I mean, how does East Hampton try to address this?
I don't think there is enough coordination on it currently right now. I think it's being piecemealed a little too much. The most expensive part about opening the road is actually the labor and of the construction phase of it. It's not the cost of the coffer that goes in or the wiring on there right now.
That's cheap.
That's the cheap part on there too. So we do is we actually give, on the easements for the towns, we give road opening permits. Maybe there might have to be a way that the DPW looks at any type of utility that comes in, asks for these road opening easements and say, if you're dropping in lines, can we put in conduits, preemptively to pull through broadband, or for any new technology that might be coming out 30 years from now.
We don't know what's going to come next.
That's correct, but a plastic conduit pipe is all of about $2 a linear foot, not even. And you could just install it in there as they're already opening right now then too, and potentially allow for that next technology to be pulled through and then connect each part. That would be something that we might have to look at and start to survey through the town as far as locations, what's underground right now. There's not
much.
Yeah, no, not at all. I know I participated a lot when LIPA came through, or PSA&G at the time came through and started putting the larger transmission lines down through the village, McGurk Street, Town Lane Road, into the substation on there. I was on the Village Green protesting against it because I thought it changed the character of our community, particularly living in the village there too, and also transmission lines so close to the house, how they affect health-wise. Myself being a cancer survivor then too, I was very sensitive to that. One of the things I came up with at the time is that some of the most archaic power lines that we have run right down the Long Island Railroad right now. Those monolithic, I would always call them the large towers are over 70 years old. What's the metal fatigue on them? Why can't we bury those with money, resiliency money that was coming out of Sandy then too? That got looked into a little bit, but that might be one of the best ways to use the easement for the railroad right now, particularly if it's also going to be open for the deep water wind line to potentially run conduit line to increase our broadband.
I guess I'm more frustrated. I mean, yesterday was perfect. I was on the telephone with an attorney who was working on something for us, and I had my computer open, and all of a sudden I lost my internet signal. And I started talking to her, and I said, well, I can't see this, but let me see if I can remember what I had on the screen before it went blank. At which point she said, well, let me, and then I lost my telephone line. So here I am in the, was it 2018? And I'm living like I'm back in the 1700s. And if we want people to come out here and we want to give them the opportunity to work out here and have real jobs, by the way, I'm all in favor of putting in conduits, but if there's nothing inside the conduits, they're not going to be here. And
Correct.
every year, when we have kids graduating from the high school, and there are no jobs, they may never come back. And so I don't think this is something we can say, well, we're not going to budget for it for another 5 or 10 years. Let's wait, because we've been waiting, I know, at least 15 or 20 years.
So you just brought up part of the reason why I decided to be appointed to the town council.
Mm-hmm.
Kids graduating high school. Kids graduating high school right now, where I'm going to have 4 kids graduating high school very shortly in succession.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions I know that I'll be making right now, such as this,
Yeah.
Infrastructure for potentially, internet jobs or more.
Well, by the way, I'll take that back. There's no such thing as an internet job
No,
anymore,
well-
in the sense that everything is the internet.
Yes, it's very true, very true.
if
We use it all
wanna
the time. But also for designing the hamlets, for where are we going to put affordable housing, potentially
Sure.
overlays. These decisions that potentially I would be making this year, next year, have repercussions that 10 years down the line for my kids are going to make those choices then too. I have a extreme sensitivity to youth and families that have grown up here and graduated from our school to say, I can't go back to my hometown because I can't get a good paying job.
Right.
I can't make a living. Okay, when they come back and say it's boring out here, it's not, because
There's
everyone can
lots to
find
go.
some beauty out here and things to do. But when it comes down to finding a job and I have to go into the hospitality or the service industry, instead of using my ingenuity that I got from Stanford or Harvard, where some of these kids are going because we have a great school system, they're feeder districts, that upsets me. And I think we have to pull out all stops to be able to provide us great of high-paying and technological savvy jobs to match their abilities. We have some very smart kids coming out of our high school out here.
No, we've actually run into some of them. GGG, for the first time, took part in the community scholarship program at the high school, and we wound up having a little GG Insights program with 2 great kids.
What kids were those?
One was Ping Edwards, and the other one was Thompson, Kyle Thompson.
Okay.
And these kids were terrific. I
Yeah.
mean, I thought I would have to really coax them into a discussion, and it was great. I mean, they just took over, and I was able to sit here and enjoy it, really.
Well, yeah.
And
It's our future.
This is the future,
Yeah.
and I think every year we don't build the infrastructure is another. How many kids graduated from the high school?
Oh, this year?
200?
I think it's maybe a little bit more. I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure.
But you're basically losing 300 or 400 kids a year.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, 50 of them come back. And as you say, the ones with the higher tech backgrounds that could take part in the newer jobs, the high-paying jobs, can't come back here.
Yeah.
Because their telephone line goes down and their internet line goes down.
And I'm not saying that you can't be an entrepreneur out here or that the service industry is not a good industry, but we have to look at more how to expand what we've sort of become a little bit out here too much. So I look forward to helping that and to that also. I'll go one more also on that is the future to me, we have to be careful of youth. I'm very sensitive to this, to my children. Drug and opiates are becoming a problem out here, and too. Everyone, when I always grew up, and people would say, well, the Shinnecock Canal will stop that. It's not anymore. It doesn't anymore. There's people being found, unfortunately, on the side of the streets right now, and it happens way too often. I think one of the ways we can provide a forum for individuals or youth, not just youth, but young adults, to stay away from drug and opioid use is give them recreational opportunities. Give them ways to use potentially sport as a means to meet new friends, to become physically engaged, to increase their self-efficacy of how they feel about themselves.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I think we have to look at that. We have some wonderful natural, resources out here that individuals can use, water-based. But maybe we have to look at, increasing sporting fields, playing centers, those type of activities.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
This is not a setup. I just know a lot of our Latino population likes to play volleyball. How many volleyball courts? Forget the beach volleyball stuff. How many volleyball courts does the town have? Do you have any idea?
I'm going to go no more than 5, and I think there's 2 over Stephen Hand's Path. There are sand ones. There might be 1 in Montauk, and the two best ones that are most recently done, and which I really enjoy, are over on Abraham's Path. When they redid the fields at Terry King, there was the four tennis courts that were originally there over by Sport Time. Those four tennis courts is where I actually learned how to play tennis with my dad, because I grew up in one of the houses right across there. They converted two of the original four tennis courts into volleyball courts for the Latino population to play on. It is wonderful to drive by there at night and see everyone playing.
Yeah.
So
and by the way, I'm not saying this is a too. I had two of my three daughters were on New York City travel volleyball teams. In fact, one was on a travel team, which was probably the best thing she ever did. She was the only person on the team who spoke English as a native language. Yeah. If you were good in Italian, Russian, and other languages, you'd be great for this team. But it's a great way, just like you say.
We played every Monday down at Main Beach. A group of guys, we were all 40 and over, playing on Main Beach, and we had fun. And I'll tell you one thing past just the actual sport and activity of sport. It was that our families came down, and they all got together and enjoyed each other's company. The kids played, and that's what can happen at these sporting and recreational facilities. That you give a
community. It's a community event.
Community is the big word. You get the community together. They see that we're all here working so hard, enjoying everything, and then they want to stay here and be part of it, and not just go home and be by themselves, but let's volunteer into the community. Let's participate in the community. And I think sport and recreation can do that, and I look forward to finding more ways in East Hampton how we can do that.
Well, I know the CPF is buying a lot of property all the time, and there's obviously a push to keep it in its natural state. And obviously, I know from Marguerite Wolfson, we don't have too many contiguous forest areas. So if you bought a piece that's contiguous to a forest, you wouldn't want to turn it into a volleyball court or a baseball diamond. But we have a lot of parcels that the CPF is now buying that are what I'll call standalone parcels. And obviously, if it's between my house and your house, we don't want the volleyball court there or the basketball court. But it just seems that not enough attention is being paid to trying to multi-purpose these CPF parcels and make them available not only to look at, but to participate in.
Well, I think that's changing a little bit right now too, in the purpose of the intent. You have to make sure you're right in the initial purpose of the resolution. What would it be? Is it going to be for open space? Is it going to be for passive recreation? Is it going to be for water quality? So if you write that into the initial purpose of the resolution to purchase or acquire, then we might be able to do so. Now you said we don't want a volleyball court between your house and my house, but it depends where our houses are. It might work well if we're in a hamlet center. Okay?
Oh, that's different. Sure.
Compared to maybe more into
rural
community.
Road,
exactly right. There might be better locations for that, or if you're in you'd be surprised how many an old mine that's in Montauk. You'd be surprised how many of those are in Montauk in an industrial area. So it might work in the right location. I think what we have to do is we have to target properties, we have to research properties, we have to analyze them. We have to come up with a good way to use them for the whole community. Now, open space is wonderful, but sometimes recreation might be great on that location if it works well.
Well, one of the things that also occurs to me, David, is, and you probably know the exact number, but my understanding is seniors now make up about 18% of the town of East Hampton, maybe 20%, and they're obviously growing. And yet, unless I'm wrong, I don't think there's a recreation area. I forget the word, where you go from the chinning bar to the pull-up. What do you call that thing?
Well, there's only one at the high school, and it's called a park course.
Oh, park
we used
course,
to work on that. But it would be a passive recreational park.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful example of one of those actually in Blue Point, where they took a property that was an old, I think it was about 11 or 12 acres, and it was actually an old greenhouse. They tore the greenhouses down, and they made passive walking trails that were ADA accessible. There's not in the town of East Hampton, there's not a single
ADA
ADA accessible
I was just going to jump on you for that, because I'm 76, at my age, I have had almost every joint redone.
I have two hip replacements myself.
In some way.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't think there's any ADA accessible path.
There's none.
Walking path.
I will help change that. I promise you that.
If nothing, and again, I'm on the airport committee. We have this clear zone. Why couldn't we have an ADA accessible walking path around the clear zone.
Well,
It-
let
it
me just,
doesn't-
can I just mention that about the airport compared to, I think some of the more appropriate places for an ADA walking path initially would be to try to access either some of our natural beauty first. Maybe not an area that's been as built up as the airport. Can we lead an individual down to the water on one of these properties,
Oh,
either
sure,
with
that'd be
crushed stone
terrific.
that would have the right inclines that ADA path has to have. You could actually or the public access on potentially on a property that was purchased for passive recreation. Can we put exercise stations around? I'll give you another one. It's
And
very
by the
busy.
way, I understand as a 76-year-old, I'm not going to do too many chinnings.
You never know.
But
slow progress is better than no progress.
right, but there's a lot of stuff I can do.
Yeah.
Well, and on one of these courses.
That's correct.
We don't have them here. That's just
There
terrible.
isn't. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we need more of those in town. I have actually putting together some plans for one and another one in town. I'm actually going to be looking for grant funding for it also then too, because the ESD and the consolidated funding application, they like these type of passive use parks right now. I'll go also. It is the first week in August. The roads are extremely busy right now. I would never let my kids, unfortunately, right now, ride their bike on the road. I think if we have these a type of walking paths that would be able to biking paths, mothers with strollers, and we were able to keep them in locations where there's no automobile or motorized vehicles. It could be a very safe resource for individuals to enjoy.
David, we're out of time.
Are we? Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm sure we'll have you back.
Okay.
So we've got jobs.
Yes.
We've got changing zoning and everything else for that, and we have passive activities and more activities to keep people safe.
And I will go two more. I think.
No, you can't. You can't.
Oh,
we're out of
next.
time.
Okay.
That's how we get you back.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you
Arthur.
very much.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.